Today on the Dad the Best I Can show.
It's like the 90-year-old billionaire. The 90-year-old billionaire would trade everything to be 40 years old with all of the insecurity and all of the uncertainty and all of the perceived and real stress.
Hey now, welcome to the Dad the Best I Can show. My name is Rob Roseman. Who wants to be a millionaire legend? Chicago futures trader, Vegas poker pro. Now I'm a dad to 3 kids, ages 6, 4, and 1. Phew! Wears me out just thinking about it. Each week we're bringing on dads like you to tell us your stories, your tips and tricks to help all of us make it through dad life. Thanks for spending some time with us today. Now let's get on with the show. Today on the Dad the Best I Can show, we're lucky to be joined by Devon Rifkin. Devon is 44. He lives in Atlanta, Georgia with his wife Heather and 3 kids, ages 14, 12, and 8. We're going to talk to Devon about his decision not to go to college and his wild ride as an entrepreneur, how he started the biggest online hanger company in the world at age 23, and how he learned how to handle having a teenage daughter. 2 fun facts about Devon: he played semi-pro football, and he worked at the real-life firm from the movie Wolf of Wall Street. Let's go. Devon, thanks for being here today. We are recording this in my kitchen, glassing it up. We like to start off the Dad the Best I Can show with some rapid-fire questions. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
What's the first car you ever owned?
An Acura Integra.
What's your favorite dramatic movie?
Gosh. Casino.
What's your favorite comedy movie of all time?
Gotta be Ace Ventura. Pet Detective.
Favorite stand-up comedian?
Andrew Dice Clay.
Favorite TV show growing up in the 90s?
Different Strokes.
Favorite TV show now?
Real Housewives of Beverly Hills.
What's your favorite meal to cook?
Barbecue. Ribs.
If you were on death row, what would be your last meal?
Joe's. Stone crabs.
Joe's Stone Crabs. What
And
do you get
hash
there?
browns. And the mustard sauce.
That is good.
Drown in it, man.
You gotta wait 2 hours, but it's all worth it, huh?
Right. Unless you're there with Rob Roseman and you can walk right in.
What's the favorite place you've ever vacationed?
Malibu.
Devon has a really interesting life story, and it started out with Devon went straight from high school into being an entrepreneur. Talk a little bit about that, Devon.
Well, I absolutely fucking hated school. You know, I was a good kid. I was a conscientious kid, but for the first 18 years of your life, when the only validation that you get is primarily tied to school, you end up having some pretty interesting thoughts, feelings, and defense mechanisms surrounding that topic. So I knew early on, despite the Jewish bubble that I grew up in, that I likely would not be going to college, which strangely is pretty much unheard of.
Yeah, it's unheard of for everybody. You finish high school, you go to college, you get a job, you took a different route.
I did. I took a different route. I ended up, to sort of check the box, I ended up going to Tallahassee Community College, while my entire friend group literally all went to Ivy League schools. I ended up, while they were at Ivy League schools, I ended up going to Tallahassee Community College, ended up meeting a girl named Heather Steinberg, who I told the day I met her that I would be marrying, and am convinced that is why, I went there and got what I needed and then moved on, and I ended up moving to New York.
You were 19 years old and you knew.
I was 18, 19 years old. Yeah, absolutely knew.
And how did your parents take you deciding not to go to college? Were they supportive? Were they pushing you in a direction? How did that go over?
My parents have always been supportive, but we joke about it to this day. I called them up one day and I said, I sold all of my books. What do you want me to do with the money? I think it was $200 or $300. And they said, you did what? I said, it's just not for me. I'm willing to do what it takes and put my happiness aside, but this literally is not for me. Mm-hmm. And so I'm no longer going to college. And that was how it started. And they asked me what I was going to do. I said, well, I've got an uncle who's best friends with a guy named Jordan Belfort, who started a firm called Stratton Oakmont. My uncle was the chairman of Perry Ellis at the time. He asked if I'd like to come up to New York and work as a stockbroker, and what could be more intriguing or sexier than when you're 18 or 19 years old to move to New York and, become a stockbroker.
You said Jordan Belfort. That name sounds familiar. Tell us who Jordan Belfort is.
Jordan Belfort was the founder of Stratton Oakmont and the person that The Wolf of Wall Street was inspired from. And he, as well as my uncle and a few other people like Steve Madden and many of the guys I worked with, ended up going to prison for things that they did that were clearly not right. Both legally and morally.
So you were like one of the people in Wolf of Wall Street then, at 20 years old.
I was. Here's where I'll give a shout out to myself. The boardroom looked exactly like the movie. Mm-hmm. There were 500 people in the boardroom, and I was the best account opener. We made 500 calls a day. We put our name up on the board, and we rang the gong if we opened an account. And yes, I was in that boardroom. I worked there for just under 2 years. I spent a year and a half learning how to sell, open accounts, somehow passed my Series 7. Then they sit you down and you're faced with what many consider to be a difficult decision, and that is, do you have a problem hurting people and not following their wishes when it comes to their investments, or do you do the right thing? And it was really a very easy decision. I ended up leaving, and I went to Oppenheimer.
At 21 years old, you had issue with, you saw all these people making all this money, and you just knew it wasn't for you, huh?
I was very, very clear about it.
Mm-hmm. So which led you to your next entrepreneurial project. What happened after Oppenheimer? You were how old, and what did you do?
So I was 23 years old at the time, still with Heather, and I ended up moving back down to Miami, and in the summer worked for my father, who had a store fixture company. They sold mannequins, racks, and one day a jewelry store owner came in and asked if we sold hangers, because he wanted hangers, of course, not for his store, but for his home. I special ordered them for him, and he spent $500 on hangers, and I thought, holy shit, who spends $500 on hangers? And then later on that week, I thought, well, if somebody's house is worth X and their wardrobe is worth Y, and they spent, Z on the closet itself, $500 kind of makes sense. And then I thought, you know what? Hangers are a very universally recognized item. Everybody needs them. They're a very defensive item by nature. You have no idea how they get in your house. They're sort of like pens that end up in your drawer. Mm-hmm. And I thought, I'm going to start a hanger company. And I started a hanger company in my apartment behind Shorty's Barbecue.
At how old were you?
I was 23.
Oh, wow. I
was 23 or 24.
So you had an idea and you just went for it.
Had an idea and I went for it. So I'll never forget, I wanted to buy the name hangers.com. And this Jewish kid, Nat Cohen, I'll never forget his name. He lived in Washington, D.C., and he had hangers.com for sale for $200,000.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't have $1,000 to my name, mm-hmm. and I thought $200,000 for a name is insane. I said, Nat, I'm just opening up a dry cleaner. I don't really need the name, but I'd like it. Mm-hmm. So we became friendly, and then a year and a half later, after building a rapport, I ended up buying the name for $10,000.
Oh.
And shortly thereafter, the economy crashed, and I quickly learned that starting a business in a down economy is the best time to do it.
So hangers.com, you started, and you ran with that for how long?
So I ran with that for 12 years.
Oh, wow.
And for the first 7 years, we never had an unprofitable month. It was a great business. And just as we started, winning awards and things were great, the economy fell out of the sky and I was faced with bankruptcy, literally overnight.
Wow.
And those were some of the best lessons I ever learned. They were some of the most painful parts of my life. I remember sitting in front of the office, just in my car, paralyzed and crying. I had no idea what the hell to do. And I had to lay off 50 people in one day. That was very difficult, but great lessons.
Mm-hmm. You'll tell some of the stories that people don't always want to hear, what really goes on behind the scenes, some of the war stories of being an entrepreneur.
That's a great point. I mean, every day, people in general are just disingenuous. We're all disingenuous. We all just tell ourselves and everybody else the stories we want to tell. And we do that because we don't want to feel stupid, and we want to be liked, and we want to feel validated. And there's a danger in that because we're really all in the same boat. And what happens is someone starts a business, they hit the first rough wave and they think my idea must not be good, or I must not be cut out for this. And that couldn't be further from the truth. You're right where you need to be. Mm-hmm. And so there was a time when I was mentoring a ton of kids, and there was a time when I was on a college speaking tour, and instead of talking about all of the awards and all of the shiny things, whether they happened or I was just making them up, because we're all like that, I spoke about how lonely and how stressful and how overwhelming and how wonderful and the whole thing. And I think people really appreciated that because that's real.
Yeah, that's the stuff you don't always hear. Everybody starts their own business, but they don't tell you how hard it is and how many times you want to quit. And you're saying that's just the rite of passage that you just got to push through, huh?
That's right. There was a great quote I saw. I'd love to take credit for it, but I can't. And it went something like this. A smooth sea never made a skilled sailor. It's true. Mm-hmm. It's really true.
Yeah. So now what? You sell hangers. You've got 3 kids, and what's your next move? What's next? Or
the next move happened the night I sold the business. We jumped on a plane. We went out to California. My dream was to move out and get a beach house in Malibu, La La Land, and experience that. And it was part out of necessity that I needed to take time off, and part out of my desire to enjoy the fruits a little bit. I knew that I had done well, but I wasn't near in a position where I, could just retire for the rest of my life. Mm-hmm. Reason that I did it was because I knew that I'd never get those years back with my kids. Mm-hmm. And you just sit there and you listen. It's like the 90-year-old billionaire. The 90-year-old billionaire would trade everything to be 40 years old with all of the insecurity and all of the uncertainty and all of the perceived and real stress. And so why I won't be a billionaire? I don't want to be a billionaire, but everybody looks back and they say, I wish I spent more time with my kids. Why is it going to be so different for me? Mm-hmm. So that's a way to actually that is a way to actually roll back time to the present. And we went out there and I took 3.5 years off. And my relationship, that changed the trajectory. That really changed the trajectory of my relationship with my kids and the dynamic of our family forever. Mm-hmm. Because I was able to spend 3.5 years uninterrupted with them from the age of 38 to 41 and a half. Mm-hmm. There's one interesting thing I'd like to mention that ties to your brilliant dad podcast, because it's just such it's such an important topic, and it's so at the epicenter of we're dads. I mean, these are lives that we're living now. And I came back and my friends were like, "Oh my God, you went to Malibu and you saw all these famous people, and the kids must have loved it. Did the kids love it?" And I'll never forget. And this is a really important answer. If we had gone and rented a cottage in Homestead, the kids would have literally had just as good a time. Mm-hmm. It had nothing to do with where we were. Yes, we liked the beach and we got to look for sea glass and have barbecues, but it really didn't have anything to do with where we were. Mm-hmm. It's really the parents that get caught up in that, not the kids. Mm-hmm.
And from there, you made your decision. What am I going to do now? Which we all wonder. And you took an interesting step that was a little out of character. What did you decide to do?
So every day that we would drive down Red Road and we'd pass Wayside Fruit Stand Market, who a friend of mine, Ellie, owns, we'd all sit there and shake our head and say, this guy is just selling a ton of milkshakes, pastries, fruit and vegetables. He's going to work in shorts and flip-flops. And I thought, I want to open one of those up here. And I ended up opening up, I bought a 3-acre piece of very prime land in a town called Loganville, an hour outside of Atlanta, and was going to build a market and a nursery. And the market was jams, jellies, honeys, milkshakes, hot dogs, frozen slushies, shave ice. We had a playground.
And how's it going? Where are you guys at today?
So we just closed it.
It's a great time to be talking to you, because that is, part of the entrepreneur life that a lot of people don't hear about, and I think is really empowering to hear.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely fraught with a lot of different emotions, a lot of defensive, like, I'm better than that. I really didn't screw up. I swear there were circumstances out of my control. Although it's always a little bit jarring once you hit that point. You're like, whoa, this is real.
Yeah, it's easy to tell people that, but then when you experience it, it's a little different. So I appreciate you telling your story about it, because it's refreshing. You don't hear people talk about these kind of things. So
yeah, thank you.
Yeah. All right, Devon, you are a 44-year-old father to 3 kids. Tell us a little bit about your dad life with 3 kids.
It's the most wonderful thing in the world. It's the most challenging thing in the world. And it's an absolute shit show. And you know what the most comforting thing is of all that? That everybody else has the exact same experience.
Let's take a quick break to talk about our Dad Tip of the Week for you, brought to you by Kickstart Reading. At Kickstart Reading, you can watch 2-minute videos that teach your kid how to read. This is how I taught my 5-year-old going into kindergarten how to read, and now my 4-year-old in pre-K is learning to read with these videos now too. Best part? 2 minutes. What dad doesn't have time for 2 minutes? Come on, guys. Go to kickstartreading.com and use the code DADTHEBEST to get your first month free. That's kickstartreading.com. So that leads into our dad tip of the week we like to do on the Dad Show. As the father to 3 kids and a 14-year-old daughter, what's your dad tip of the week, Devon?
So here's a very interesting tip. We, as parents, for number of different reasons, want to have as much say and as much involvement with trying to help our kids get through whatever they're going through. And so we kind of pounce. And I remember people saying to me, oh, you have a daughter. I'm so sorry. She's going to be a teenager. And I'm thinking, not my daughter. I mean, naively, not my daughter. She's sweet. You don't know her. And then one day, literally one day, we were having a conversation. And I feel like my daughter's head just turned around for an hour in a 360-degree direction. She ran into her room and locked the door for a year. She was mean to the other kids in the house, and that was upsetting them, and it was disrupting our vision of what a happy, responsible house looks like. And so we tried a lot of different things, and then one day the door opened up, and she came out, and really, truly, the next year, and it's probably been a year and a half since then, it not only returned to where it was prior to her head turning around, but she's 10 times better because she just got to that place. So what we learned was sometimes we just have to let kids go through what they need to go through on their timetable, as long as they're not hurting themselves. And we've actually taken that and applied it to the other kids instead of trying to interfere. And that's a hard thing to do, but it kind of takes the pressure off also. Oh, can I make mention of one more thing? You just tripped my mind.
Yeah, of course.
So Heather will say to me sometimes, can you believe that Jack, our son, did this? And I'm like, yeah, can you believe he did that? How could he do that? And then one day, pretty early on, maybe when he was about 6, now he's 12, I looked at Heather and I said, you know what? Is he supposed to innately know where the boundary is? I mean, isn't it his job to cross the boundary and our job to establish the boundary? And that was such a basic comment, but such a profound thing and conversation to have. They're not going to naturally know. And arguably, boundaries are different in every household. But it's not his job to naturally just go up to the edge every time. It's our job to establish the boundaries and to reinforce the boundaries. And I'm a believer. This is certainly not for me. It's something that I've read and heard for a long time and now believe. I think that kids crave for structure. I think they want to know where they stand. And that sounds somewhat counterintuitive, but it's our job. It's not their job to know right where to move up to. And I think that is actually probably the biggest tip.
So we were shaped so much by how we were parented. What is one thing you learned from your parents, your mom and your dad?
God, you have such a great, sexy radio voice. I'm a mama's boy, admittedly. Proudly, I'm a mama's boy. I'll always be a mama's boy. And I am so fortunate to have had my parents. I still have my dad. But the older I get, the more I realize that they were way ahead of their time in supporting my happiness. Which sounds incredibly alternative and softy, and especially in a society of achievement. And there's just such simple brilliance in that. what more could you want than for yourself or for your kids to be happy? It's not easy to figure out how to get there, but they have always supported my happiness, starting with the college thing. And I wonder, though, if I didn't have a successful run, how that might change the conversation. But isn't that a really nice thing? What more could you want than for your parents to want you to be happy?
All right, Devon. Well, this was always fun. It's always great to talk to you. You've got such a cool story, so I'm glad you're able to share it with people out there. Thanks for coming by the Dad the Best I Can show.
Thanks for having me, man.
All right, man.
All right, this is great.
Thank you guys for listening to the Dad the Best I Can show. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and leave us a 5-star rating on iTunes or Apple Podcasts. Actually, 5 stars. We could do better than that. Brooks? Infinity stars. Cameron? How many stars?
Infinity 1,000.
Infinity 1,000. You gotta one-up them in this household. Thanks. See ya.